Good morning. It is Monday, May the 2nd, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have talk show hosts, no free lunch, the collapse of parenting, and the big hole. All that and more when I come back. Thank you. And now the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for May the 2nd. I have released my warrior angels against demonic princes. When you find yourself harassed by demonic princes who have come to defeat you and to cause destruction in your life, remember the testimony of my servant Daniel and my mighty warrior angel who came to fight the prince of Persia in his stead. My warrior angels stand ready to fight for you against the demonic princes in your life. Remember the angel's words to Daniel, for they apply to your life also. You are greatly beloved by me. Fear not. Peace be to you. Be strong. Yes, be strong. Let the power of my warrior angels and the words of comfort they will speak to you touch you with strength, for they stand ready to come to your defense. Daniel chapter 10, verses 18 through 21. Prayer declaration. Lord, release your warrior angels against the demonic princes who would try to harass and harm me. Touch my life and strengthen me with your power. Let your angels fight the battle in my stead. For in their mighty power, the demonic princes of this world will fall in defeat and release me from their grip. Amen. And that was the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for May the 2nd. Thank you. And now there's no free lunch. Quote, love locally, trade globally, unquote. Russ Roberts. Most of us have heard the expression or seen the bumper sticker, quote, think globally, act locally, unquote. The intent for some may be benign, but the meaning is generally that our mindset ought to be on global betterment, and we ought to do so with local stewardship that protects global interests, especially the environment. Robert's twist on the misguided bumper sticker adds exponentially more wisdom and practicality. We love most of those who are closest to us, and they love us the most in return. Strangers in a strange land cannot love us because they do not know us. It is an empty platitude to talk about love in a generic and impersonal manner, devoid of relationship, commitment, and sacrifice. And in the second half of Robert's revision, we get the proper behavior for those who actually do want to impact global betterment, the practice of free exchange. Societies benefit one another when they trade with one another, and real love and meaningful relationships happen in our most local of bonds and ties. This is not controversial, but has somehow been ignored as we have sought to replace these concepts with bubblegum ideology that gets both the local and global part wrong. And there's no free lunch. Back in a minute. Thank you. What are the true conservative political priorities? Number one, a constitutional amendment banning abortion throughout the country. Number two, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number three, the immediate decertification of all public employee unions. Number four, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liability to all government regulators. Number five, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number six, the immediate repeal of all dictator laws. Number seven, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. Number eight, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. Number nine, a flexible minimum wage. Number 10, means-tested health care. And number 11, the immediate and permanent prohibition of investment banking by any office holder. Back in a minute. Thank you. The biggest mistakes that right-wing talk show hosts make. Number one, they are neutral. Number two, they fail to correct their mistakes. Three, they demoralize their audiences. Number four, they contradict themselves. Back in a minute. Thank you. So the one thing that is really coming home to me is that the biggest mistake right-wing talk show hosts are making and have made for the past 30 years. And it's really sad that it's taken me 30 years to figure this out, but that's the way it is. So 30 years is that they spend their time talking only about the left. What it is that the left is doing, what are they thinking, what are their plans, who on the left I probably know more about who is in the Joe Biden administration than I know about who is in Kevin McCarthy's inner circle. Half the time I can't even remember McCarthy's name. And then we got the senator from Kentucky. Half the time I can't remember his name because we never talk about him. We never talk about Republican priorities, Republican ideas, Republican wants and needs for this country, conservative wants and needs for this country. What is it that we plan to do politically? What is it we plan to do culturally for this country? What are our plans here? And we don't discuss that because we have too many talk show hosts that are too busy talking about Jen Psaki, talking about CRT, talking about things that don't matter a hill of beans to anybody about anything. We are in a situation right now where the Republicans are about to take power. They're about to supposedly, everybody seems to be on board, and there's a consensus that the Republicans is a red wave. There's going to 50 seats or more in the House, take over the Senate, and then what happens in January? Nobody's talking about that. What's the mandate? What is it exactly that Republicans are supposed to do with this newfound authority? No answer. The GOP, the Republican Party won't answer that question. The RNC won't answer that question because the Republicans are scared to death. They're scared to death. They're afraid that if they open their mouth and say something and say, this is our agenda, that it's going to hurt their chances for getting into the majority next January. They're just scared. They don't have to be. If they knew how to deal with the left, well, at least the way I do, they wouldn't have to. They wouldn't have to be scared at all. They could be bold, but they're not. So they spend all their time hammering the left. And what does that do to my morale? It hurts my morale. After 2 or 3 hours of listening to Dan Bongino, and then after that, some other right-wing schmuck and another right-wing schmuck, I'm ready to roll down the street, flipping off everybody like Mr. Bean sitting in that convertible, flipping off everybody. I'm assuming that he was in Beverly Hills somewhere, flipping everybody off, except he's doing it with a smile on his face. I'm not. Other than that, I'm just depressed. And then these same assholes, these same right-wing talk show host assholes who are busy demoralizing their audience, then want to know and can't understand why it is nobody's motivated. Well, I don't understand. Why aren't people doing something? Are you serious? Are you really that stupid? Can't you figure out that the best defense is a good offense? And let me give you the example of the century, maybe the example of this country's history. And that was 1995. 1994, the Republicans swept into office. It was a crushing victory. It had nothing to do with the contract with America, but we'll get to that in a second. What it was about was the Black Caucus wanted more black people in Congress. So they decided to gerrymander the districts, make sure that the districts got gerrymandered so there's more black districts and blacks in Congress. Unfortunately, when you do that, you create more Republican districts. And so what ends up happening is, yes, there's more blacks in Congress, but now the Democrats have given up their majority for the first time in 40 years. They handed it over to the Republicans. Now, along comes Newt Gingrich. He's smart enough to figure out if they go into January with no mandate, then they may as well not even be in office. Okay? So what he does is something that's called political theater. He comes along and he makes this contract with America. He says, if, as though there's doubt, if you vote for us, we will bring up these 10 items for a vote. Okay, we promise we'll bring up these 10 items for a vote. We can't promise they'll pass, but we will promise to bring them up for a vote. The Republicans got elected, and Newt Gingrich did exactly that. I mean, right away, first day, they start, boom, boom, one bill after another, and you know what? 9 of the 10 actually passed. The last one did not. But everything else passed. Not only did he make his promise to bring these up for a vote, they actually, 9 out of 10 passed. That's amazing. And what was more interesting and amazing was the Democrats. The Democrats were completely disoriented. They had no idea what to do. They were running around in circles like chickens with their heads cut off. Because for the first time in their political lives, they didn't control the agenda. Somebody else, the Republicans, controlled the agenda. And that's what we could be doing right now. Let's skip CRT. Let's take a day off. Let's have the right-wing talk show host schmucks take a day off from talking about the left. Don't talk about anybody or anything that has to do with the left, and talk only about Republicans, conservatives, what it is we want for America, talking about what it is that we expect to get accomplished in 2023, etc. Take just one day off. Because I swear there's times when I think that the right loves the left, that all these talk show hosts just love the left because the left makes them rich. Okay? Without the left, they wouldn't have anything to talk about. Nothing to talk about. Their shows would be a big vacuum. Static. Full of static. They would have nothing to talk about if it wasn't for the left. So they should be, what Dan Bongino and all the rest of them should be doing is giving the left a cut of whatever it is that they're getting paid. And it goes with Fox as well. It goes with Mr. Tucker Carlson, who's actually one of the better people to listen to because he's not as grim. At least he knows how to use sarcasm and laughter as a tool to deal with the lunacy on the left. But he's still as guilty as anybody else of spending all day, or his whole hour, I guess he has a 1-hour show, talking about the left, not talking about what is the right doing. There's all kinds of things that are going on in this country that is good for this country that gets ignored because these so-called right-wingers, these so-called conservatives on the radio simply ignore it. One of the issues today was that there was a flag issue. Somebody had a flag with a cross on it, a Christian-type cross, although it was described as a Latin cross, and the city of Boston said you can't fly that flag. It was taken to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court struck it down. That's the kind of thing we need. You want me to be motivated, Mr. Talk Show host? You want everybody else to be motivated? This is the kind of news we need to hear. So again, to sum up here, you're a talk show host, knock it off with talking about the left all the time. Screw the left. Let's start talking about the right, about conservatives and about Republicans and what it is that we need to do to restore sanity to our country. Thank you. And now, the collapse of parenting, how we hurt our children when we treat them like adults. And this is chapter 7, is called Misconceptions. When I met with parents, some questions came up again and again. Parents want to do the right thing, but they are sometimes reluctant to try because certain misconceptions get in the way. We now have the foundation in place to address each of these misconceptions. Here's the first. I'm worried about a rebound effect. If I try to be the kind of parent you describe, and I force my child to behave virtuously, whatever that means, then when she goes away to college and she's on her own, I'm worried she will do all the kinds of crazy things that she wouldn't have done otherwise because I have prevented her from doing stuff she wants to do. She won't have learned how to make good choices on her own. Longitudinal studies, such as those we considered in the previous chapter, are helpful in addressing this misconception. Those studies show that in general, well-behaved kids are more likely to grow up to be well-behaved adults. Kids raised by more permissive parents are more likely to get into trouble as adults, trouble with alcohol, trouble with drug abuse, trouble with anxiety and depression. In the early 1990s, researchers in the United States launched an ambitious study of more than 20,000 American kids drawn from every part of the United States, urban and rural, Asian, Black, Latino, and white, affluent, and low income, East Coast and West Coast and Midwestern and Southern, and so forth. They gathered data on the teenagers in 1994 when most of these kids were 12 to 14 years old, and then periodically through 2008. Researchers who have analyzed these data found that the children of authoritative parents do better in school, are less likely to get drunk, and are less likely to engage in unsafe sexual practices, not only in their early teenage years, but also in their 20s, compared to the children of parents who are less authoritative. They go on to have healthier, happier, romantic relationships in young adulthood. As adults, they have healthier babies, even after adjusting for demographic variables such as race, ethnicity, and household income. Diana Baumrind and her colleagues and students have published studies over the past 40 years addressing some of the same issues. Baumrind and her colleagues assessed how parents interacted with their kids when the children were young, then studied the outcomes many years down the road. Baumrind divided parenting styles into 3 categories, which we can refer to as too hard, too soft, and just right. Too hard parents rarely show any kindness or love to their children. They often make unrealistic demands. The children of these harsh parents are more likely than others to become abusive parents themselves 20 years down the road. The children of too hard parents are also more likely as adults to have difficulty sustaining romantic relationships. Too soft parents are usually good at expressing love and affection, but not so good at enforcing rules. The children of too soft parents are more likely, as adults, to have problems with drug and alcohol abuse, to struggle financially, regardless of their actual income, because they find it difficult to live within their means and more likely to be convicted of a felony. Just right parents communicate their love for the child, but they also enforce rules fairly and consistently. The rules may be unbent on occasion when necessary, but they don't break. Over more than 4 decades of research, Baumrind accumulated overwhelming evidence that the healthiest parenting style is the just right style. The children of just right parents are the most likely to have good outcomes, no matter which outcome you look at. Just right parents are strict, within reasonable bounds, and also loving. When I present these 3 categories, almost all parents say they want to be just right, but what they consider just right is different from what their parents would have considered just right. So this is a perfect place for me to stop here and make a comment. What's going on here and what has gone on in terms of parenting is how did people learn to be a parent? You learned it from your parents, from your grandparents, from your family and extended family. Because, by the way, how do you know if you're just right? How do you know if you're too hard? How do you know if you're too soft? The way you would know is you go to your parents. Hey, I said this, I did this with Billy. Do you think that's too hard? Am I being too harsh? You go with your parents and their parents. That's how you learned to be a parent. Then the left came along in the 1970s and said, no. Parents don't know anything about parenting. We PhDs know about parenting. So we're going to write a bunch of books and we're going to tell you how you should parent your children. Of course, all these PhDs are lefties, so what they're really doing is teaching you the lefty version. They're infiltrating your family with their lefty anti-values, as it were. So here is Dr. Sachs, who is doing exactly the same thing his predecessors did, where he's writing a book telling parents they don't know how to parent and that they should listen to him instead of the other book writers. Here's a better idea. Instead of listening to the people that write the books, listen to and ask questions of your parents, your grandparents, your family members, your extended family, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters that have family. Ask them. Okay? We don't need studies. We don't need 20,000 child studies to know what styles are right and what styles are not right. When he was explaining about being too soft or too easy results in people going to prison, I know that from experience, from watching other kids growing up in the neighborhood that were spoiled. We call them spoiled brats. And spoiled brats end up getting in trouble. They end up smoking early. They end up drinking early. And usually when you're drinking early, you end up becoming an alcoholic. Okay? So we saw that. We don't need a book to tell us about it. The too hard parents, we would see children, some of our other kids in school or around the neighborhood that had very strict parents, and we saw them, watch them suffer. We don't need, again, a book with all kinds of studies in it to tell us what the results of too easy or too hard is. And that, again, as he said, there's some loving kindness, but also there's rules, and that the rules are firm, but not completely rigid. So let's see what else we got here. Let me see. Many parents today perceive a tension between strict and loving. They think you can be either strict or loving, but not both. Baumrind's research proves that the notion to be wrong. The parents who she found to be just right were both strict and loving. If you're not enforcing the rules, if your kids regard you as loving but not strict, then you're too soft. As I said, there's been a shift in American parenting from just right to too soft as measured by the standards in 1985. Well, I say not measured by any standards other than the experience that you have. So let me see here. Supposing you are hiring a new employee and you have to choose between Sonia and Vanessa. Sonia's previous employers tell you that she always shows up for work on time, never cheats or steals, never uses company time for personal chores. Vanessa's previous employers tell you that Vanessa often shows up an hour or two late for work. She has stolen office property and then lied about it, and she often visits Instagram on company computer when she's supposed to be working. Would you say, I'm sure Vanessa's gotten rid of all of her bad impulses, so now is the time to hire her? Would you say, I won't hire Sonia because she is so repressed? Odds are good that she's going to rebound sometime soon? No, you wouldn't. In this example, the prospective employer is following a rule which used to be well known to American parents. Virtue begets virtue, and vice begets vice. Now, on to the next misconception. I'm worried that if I follow your advice, my child will be an outcast. He will be the only one who isn't allowed to play Halo or Grand Theft Auto. I'm worried that he will be unpopular and that he will blame me for that. And he will be right. I'm trying to find the right balance here. Well, yes, there is, but the key here is what kids refer to as being a snitch. If your child tries to assume authority that they don't have, that's where they're going to end up having problems and being, as you put it, unpopular. That's what I experienced again growing up. The kids that were live and let kids, they were people that mind their own business. They're not going to lie for anybody, but they mind their own business. They don't run to the teacher every time somebody, says a dirty word, kind of thing. Those are the kids, the ones that are going to be tattletaling. That's what we used to call it. The tattletales are the ones that end up being unpopular and not allowed to associate with the other kids. But if you are not assuming authority that you don't have, then you have nothing to worry about. Let's see. Let's unpack multiple assumptions driving this parent's concerns. Assumption number 1, it is important for my child to be popular. False. Being popular in the United States in the 21st century often entails unhealthy behavior and attitudes, beginning with a disregard for parental authority. Assumption number 2, it's unrealistic for me to hold my child responsible for behavior outside my home. Also false. I observed many just right parents closely and at first hand over the past 20 years in my medical practice, first in Maryland and more recently in Pennsylvania. All of the just parents I have known expect their child to behave outside the home as he or she does when at home. There's a word for that consistency of behavior. The word is integrity. And it was the same thing with us when we were growing up. Our parents expected us and taught us to behave in a certain way, both inside and outside the home. And we were told, if you guys don't want to behave, we're not going to take you anywhere. We're not going to go out to dinner. We're not going to go on vacations. We're just not going to go anywhere. So that's not a shocking revelation there. Assumption number 3, parents should find a balance between too hard and too soft. True, but misunderstood. The parent who asked this question had accepted the contemporary American notion that parents have to choose between being strict or loving. In other words, a false dichotomy. So, back in a minute. Thank you. And now, chapter 26 of the book called the My Bicentennial, Tales from My Bicentennial Year by Mike Buell, and a story of a family growing up in Gansevoort, New York in the Adirondacks in 1975. And last we had finished the chapter 25, which was about the Big Trouble on Memorial Day, where the kids accidentally set a bush. They're screwing around with candles and fire and whatnot. Accidentally set a bush on fire, which started a tree on fire, which then, this is during Memorial Day celebrations, and the fire department had to come out, and it was big drama and whatnot. So now we have chapter 26, The Big Hole. It's another long chapter, and so I'm going to divide it into 2, and this will be the first half of chapter 26, The Big Hole. After the big fire, life wasn't going that well. Any infraction I may have made was answered with a loud snap from Mom. "Oh my God, what are you going to do, burn down the house next?" For instance, fighting with my sister over what was on the 4 channels of TV would lead to Mom yelling, "Put on what she wants. She didn't burn down the woods. Or are you going to burn down the house for his revenge?" Or, not taking out the garbage after immediately being asked, I would hear, "What are you waiting for, the garbage to build up so you can have a garbage fire?" After all that, I was glad to be headed down to church this Saturday morning to paint. Saturday finally came. Wow. I was actually looking forward to painting. I couldn't wait to get out of the house. The only downside was that, for June, it was extremely hot and sunny. Not that I was complaining. Heck, to be outside on a nice sunny day was great. I said goodbye and was immediately warned by my mom on the way out the door. No burning anything. I flew out the door and down the stairs, grabbed my bike, and hightailed it over to Mike C's. He was already zipping out his driveway towards me. We got Jean and Brad and then went over to Big Russ's. No Russ in the driveway. So we climbed up the stairs and knocked on the door. No answer. Big Russ was a no-show. Well, anyway, we headed out. Later that summer, Big Russ told us that his father, while upset with the fire thing, felt that since he was not Catholic, painting the church was not the right punishment. So instead, Russ had to go to his grandmother's and do whatever she wanted for the day. Made sense to us, I guess. Upon arrival at the church parking lot, we saw Father H. standing back by the shed behind the church. So we pedaled right down to him. We all pulled up and jumped off our bikes. Father H. looked up at us with his Marlboro hanging out of his mouth. He looked different. He was dressed normal, no black with the white collar. He was wearing Levi jeans, an orange t-shirt, and sneakers. Nothing wrong with the look. Just kind of weird to see him outside of his priest uniform. He looked up at us with a little smile on his face. Then he says, "Boys, I appreciate you helping out here in painting. But what the heck happened with this fire thing?" So now we had to confess to it all over again to a priest. Beautiful. After I got done telling Father H. the whole story, to my and the guy's astonishment, he just laughed and laughed. Then he finally said, "Okay, God forgives you. Your parents, on the other hand, are a different story. Let's get painting this shed." "Shed?" I asked. "I thought we were painting the church." No, the shed needs to be painted, not the church. Look at it, it's all old looking and peeling. You guys should be able to finish this up this morning with a good effort." He said, "This was great news. We all thought we would be here until dinner. We even brought lunches and drinks with us. I brought my new transistor radio that I bought with my own money." Father H. handed us some scrapers to get the old paint, scrapers, to get the old paint off the walls. We put some tarps down around the sides and then started. I was messing around with my transistor radio and found a radio station that was playing the Captain and Tennille and other assorted garbage. The transistor radio, for those that are not as high-tech as I am, was about the size of a small walkie-talkie thing. Mine was bright yellow, and the holes for the speaker formed a circle on the front. Then there were just 2 dials, the on dial with the volume you just turned up, and the tuning dial. It was an AM radio. But I didn't know any different, and it was something to listen to. Well worth the $7.99 I spent on it. We started scraping and scraping and scraping. Father H. wanted it right down to the wood. The sun pounding down on us, sweat dripping down. Huge Gene was always a sweater. I would sweat a little bit, but Huge Gene was sweating like it was just pouring out of him. Mike C. was having a tough time scraping with his arm still in a cast. He could only do it one-handed, whereas we could switch hands or use both. When we all finished our walls, we went over and helped Mike C. finish up his. We looked around for Father H. to get us the paint and brushes so we could get started. But he was nowhere to be found. Then out he came from the bingo hall. He was carrying 4 orange sodas with him. This was great. We never got soda, and here was Father H. with orange soda, which was my favorite anyways. He told us to take a break, and he would get the paint set up. We were painting the shed white. He mixed up the paint, poured a little into 4 smaller tins, and got 4 brushes. "Okay, boys, you ready? All you need to do is paint with the grain, side to side, follow the wood, and put on a good heavy coat. That should be that, he announced. The painting went on, side to side, white on white, sun beating down, sweat pouring off huge Gene. Mike C. at half the pace as the rest of us. Soon we were done. Father H. came back around and looked it over, walking slowly around each side, pointing out little spots that needed to be hit with some paint real quick. Then he proclaimed, "You boys are done. Thanks. Now just rinse the brushes and the tins out back with the hose, and I'll put away the paint." I grabbed the brushes and the tins and headed out back to rinse them off. Gene and Brad started shaking out the tarps and folding them up to put back in the shed. Mike C. swept up the parking lot around the shed, and then we were done. We got on our bikes, gave a wave to Father H., and headed out. "I can't believe we were done already. It's only lunchtime," I said. "Yep, now when we get home, I'm sure that I'll have more chores to do," said Mike C. "You're right," said Huge Gene as we pedaled along back to our houses. "Wait a second," said Huge Gene as he slammed on his brakes. "It's hot, it's Saturday, and we have a couple of hours at least, where we won't be missed. And if we go home, y'all know what's waiting. Work, mowing the lawns, weeding gardens, and who knows what other punishments will come our way." Huge Gene stated, "What do you want to do?" Who knows what punishments will come our way, Huge Gene stated. "What do you want to do, Gene?" we asked. "Let's go to the big hole and go swimming," he said. This statement itself was pure Huge Gene, always up for some fun, for something better. The rest of us were resigned to go home and take our beating for the fire and do more chores. Not Huge Gene. He's the one that started the fires, and now we're paying the price. Now he wanted us to go against strict orders from all our parents to never go to the big hole. Not only that, but we were supposed to go home, weren't we? As we discussed all this, little Brad piped up with, "No one ever told us to come straight home." Which was true. Mom never said come straight home. She just said that when you come home, you have more to do. Okay, so let's say we're past that issue, and we might have a little leeway to go somewhere. We certainly did not have any leeway to go to the big hole, which was off limits, and we all knew it. But little Brad had another interpretation of the big hole rules. He remembered hearing the mom say, "Never, ever go swimming in that big hole. People die in that water. You don't want to die just to get a swim, do you?" In little Brad's mind, that simply meant that we could go look at it, maybe even wade into it, but we could absolutely not go swimming. The big hole was a curious mystery to us. The big kids in town all went swimming at this mysterious big hole. It was supposed to be somewhere deep in the woods behind the post office. We simply had to check it out. With Brad's new interpretation of the mom's rules, it certainly made it easier to go. Plus, we were sick of being called wussies by the other kids because we weren't allowed to go. So we turned our bikes around towards the post office, using the flimsy understanding that we did not receive instructions to come straight home and that we could go to it, but not swim in it. So off we raced to the big hole. None of us really knew how to get there, but we knew the trail started behind the post office. We raced to the back of the post office. The back of the building was just a few feet from the woods. We rode our bikes a little to the left, no trail. We rode back over to the right, no trail. We rode back over to the left and this time went farther, down a couple of 100 feet or so along the woods. Nothing. We rode back over to the right and Mike C. started yelling, "I think I found it." We all scampered over and found a little trail that barely was big enough for a person, but not wide enough for a bike. But we didn't want to leave our bikes behind the post office. Not that we were worried about anyone taking them. We worried that someone might see the bikes and identify them as ours. Then, before you knew it, the sheriff would be after us again. We didn't need that. The trail looked like some old Indian trail or something. I found it hard to believe that the big hole was that popular if it was such a small trail. Heck, if we had trails bigger in our woods. We proceeded on one by one, walking our bikes next to us. After a while, the trail started going up a small mountain rise. Huge Gene had enough of walking the bikes. No way to walk them up that hill. Let's just put them off the trail and cover them up. No one will see them way back there. Sounded good to us. We walked our bikes over a little ways off the trail, and then we covered them up with leaves and branches and stuff. If you knew our bikes were lying there, you could see them. But if you're just walking by, you wouldn't notice. I ran back real quick and got my transistor radio out of the knapsack off the back of the bike. Nothing better than wading with some tunes on, I said. As we continued down the trail, it seemed to be getting darker and darker. The canopy of leaves and pine needles on the top of the forest made it harder and harder to see the sky. The trail grew steeper and slicker. The matted down dirt that formed the trail was turning into slick clay on the top of granite stone. We kept going deeper down the trail. Small whispers started creeping into my mind that perhaps this was not the best idea. Maybe we should turn back. Turning back was not even remotely a consideration for Huge Gene and the others. Boldly they marched on, Gene motioning to us with his hand to his ear that he thought he could hear sounds of water rushing. We all stopped, held our breath, and put our hands to our ears to act as some sort of grand hearing aid, all the while straining to hear the sounds of the water rushing. I had to agree, if you concentrated real hard, you could make it out. We looked at each other and realized that the coveted big hole was only a short distance away. We sprinted up the trail, arms waving, screaming like banshees, slipping and wiping out the slick clay as we took the corners of the paths, desperately trying to reach the water. We darted around. What I was hoping was the last turn into the big hole, only to run smack right into a wall of stone. The path slammed right into this granite cliff. This was pretty wide and maybe 20 or 30 feet high. There were small trees and plants hanging and growing out of this outcropping of stone. And if you look close, you could see a little path designed to help you climb up it. Mike C. was looking at this, and with his arm still in a cast, just turned around in disgust and said, "What the heck am I doing? Even if I can manage to get up this thing, I can't get my arm wet, or my cast will be ruined. You guys go ahead, and I'll be looking out." Huge Gene answered Mike C. a little too quickly with, "Yeah, okay," and jumped on the wall trying to figure out where to put his hands and feet. I think Mike C. was looking for the, "Oh well, let's just all go back" answer from the guys. He was, however, quickly rebuffed and had to watch as the three of us tried to get up the wall. And that was chapter 27, I believe, 26, The Big Hole, from Tales from my bicentennial year by Mike Buell. Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers, and reminding you to listen to the John and Ken Show on KFI AM 640, Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Also, KFI needs to bring back Brian Suits and his show, The Dark Secret Place. Hashtag bring back Brian Suits. Until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.